Alright, welcome to the fourth and final video here of this Donors Choose Recommender practice. We've created our experiment and now it's time to deploy it. Now to keep things simple, I went ahead and made a few changes that I'll point out right now that you can pause and make in your own experiment. First thing first, just because we're on a free tiered platform here, there's not a lot of server power, I needed to reduce the amount of data that we're scoring. So I put in this partition sample and pill, which we used in a prior video. And I turned it all the way down to 2%, used a random seed of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice this comes after the CSV and before the select columns. Go ahead and add that in. Once you've done that, the next step is to eliminate all the pills we used for the regression modeling to determine which features to keep. And I'm only keeping project cost and days to be funded here. So go ahead and delete all of those pills as well. So now we have just what we need to set up our predictive web service. So once you've done this, run the entire thing, and then this setup web service should show up in white. If it's grayed out, just run the whole thing from scratch all over again, and then it should show up as white again. So go ahead and click this predictive web service experiment. It'll create this new predictive experiment, adds a web service input and output. Notice it took the split data and the train matchbox recommender and turned it into this new pill, which gets stored as a trained model right here. DonorsChoose.org, trained model, that's the one. So what exactly is in this pill? Well, if you go back to the chapter, let's see, right here on collaborative filtering. Remember when we talked about support, confidence, and lift, and demonstrated how a recommender model, basic recommender model works, and we get to where we use these lift scores right here to then make recommendation orders down here. So these lift scores are what is being recorded right here in this trained model pill. And so it's used to take a user ID. Now in this case, let's see what we've got here. Notice the lift scores apply regardless of what type of scoring kind we're using. It's the same, the trained model happens before that. This is just a way of determining what our inputs and outputs should be. So let's start here with an item recommendation for all items. So this is when a user input, a user ID or donor ID is the input, and 5 recommended project IDs are the output. So let's go ahead and train this whole model, or run it, sorry, and I'll pause this. All right, that's all finished. Let's go ahead and deploy this web service. Again, don't follow along here unless you want to, because I'm going to delete these things that I've created, or this web service in particular. I wanted to start by showing you the wrong way here. So, all right, we've got our API key and this request response test button here. So here's what it's looking for: project ID, donation ID, donor ID, donation included optional donation, donation amount, donation card sequence, received date. Okay, why does it want all of this data? Well, let's go back to our predictive experiment. It's because by default, the web service input goes into the same place that the original data set does. So when the web service is created, the way it determines what the input fields are required is it goes back up the chain right here in the same place where it's connected to see what data is flowing out of the other pills. And it sees all of those original pills in this file. Well, we don't want to have to give it that. We don't know what the donation amount is. That's what we're trying to predict, basically, so that we can create the recommendation. So what we need to do is connect this after those things have been filtered out. So let's start by changing this connection. Actually, we'll delete the web service in a second. Let's change this connection after the select columns and data set. So this is going to be before donation amount gets transformed, and after we filter out all those other fields. Well, technically, we no longer need donation amount either. And if this is going to be an item recommendation, the only input required should be a donor ID, because it's going to recommend project IDs for us. So technically, we don't need any of these pills anymore. In addition, I'm going to connect this after where this select columns and data set goes. This will still need to go over here so that when it does its scoring, it knows what all the different project IDs and donor IDs are. But I think I'm going to add one more select columns here, or no, but I'll run this into this one, apply that one to both. And then right here, I'm going to tell it that all we need now is a donor ID. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. So this is still not the right way quite yet, but I just want to show you one step at a time here how this adjusts. So web service is coming down here before the select columns, goes back up the partition and sample, which this column technically still includes everything from the one above it, all these things. So it's going to give us the same problem as before, but all we've solved so far is that it's no longer going to pass on anything but the donor ID. But as long as this works, then what we'll do is connect the web service input down into both these same spots where the select columns goes into. Okay, that finished. Let's take a look at the results here. All right, we've got a user ID and then 5 recommended projects from across all projects. That's exactly what we're looking for. However, if I generate and deploy this web service again, it's going to once again expect all of those columns from up here. So technically, our web service needs to, I'm going to move this down here. Our web service input needs to connect after select columns so that when it goes back up the chain, it's only expecting what's in the select columns field. So I'm going to pull this down into here and down into here. Actually, no, sorry, just into here. There we go. So as it goes back up here, it's going to look and see what the output of select columns is. Well, let's run this, just in case we've forgotten. Okay, right-click, View Data Set. All we've got is donor ID, right? We don't need project ID or donation amount, because those lift scores have already been trained and are stored right here. Those aren't going to change. We don't need them anymore. So let's try to think of the easiest way to organize these. I think I'm making it worse. Oh well, that's fine. All right, so let's go ahead and run this whole thing. So now the donor ID that we're interested in is going to come straight down into here. When the web service gets generated, it's going to look right back up the chain and see that, okay, donor ID is the only thing that's needed. However, once again, I want you to still, this is only optional. There's still one problem left that I want to address after I deploy this web service again. So before I can deploy it, I'm going to delete the last one I created. It can overwrite, but I've occasionally had problems with it working properly, and so I prefer to just go ahead and delete it first, then come back in here and redeploy. Okay, so you know what I should do? Let me go back real quick and copy one of the possible donor IDs. So right click on this. Nope, sorry. After we've partitioned and sampled, visualize. Here we go. Let's just grab this first donor ID from the list. Go back to our web service. I always do that. Not data set, web service. Okay, let's test this out. And look, it's just asking for a donor ID, and that's all. Perfect. That's what we want. So now it's running that input through our web service to see if it can find the 5 most recommended projects based on that. And while it's doing that and thinking, let's go ahead and download this Excel file right here that we can test it within. So notice it just finished and it came back with 5 projects returned. All right, let's make sure this works in Excel. It says, can we download sample data? Yes, go ahead. Okay, enable edit. Over here it's going to pull up our web service. Yep, beautiful, there it is. Let's click on it. Okay, let's use sample data. That brings in these donor IDs over here. Click on input range, this button right here. It selects all of these. Yep, that's our inputs. Output cell, we're going to manually type in sheet 1 exclamation point B1. So it's going to start by putting these right there. Include headers. Yep, it's going to override values. We're also going to auto predict. So the web service is a little slow. Again, it's a free tier. It's understandable. Hopefully, in a few seconds here, it's going to show us 5 project IDs. There we go. Now, these items are our project IDs. This user here is just repeating the donor ID. Do we need it to give us back the user ID again? No, all we need are these 5 recommended projects. Also, it's kind of tough. It'd be a lot easier, if, at least for, I mean, this is great for production, to give this to our software developers to implement into the mobile app or the web app. But for our testing, it'd be nice if we could see actual names here and project names there. So I'm going to go through and quickly make some changes to show us how to be able to see those, and let's eliminate this duplicated user ID that we no longer need. So I'm going to close that out. Don't save. I'm going to go all the way back. Whoops. I'm going to delete the web service. Yes. I'm going to delete the predictive experiment. Yes. And go back to the original experiment. And to fix this, I need to join the donation or the donor ID and the project ID to its appropriate tables. So you close that out. We're going to need a little bit of space here. I'm going to pull this up. Pull this up. Pull all of these up. Hit the number 0 to resize. Let's grab a join data. Actually, you know what? Let's do this after we partition and sample. Okay, let's pull this data down to the left side, and let's grab the donors, put them over here on the right. Let's join donor ID and donor ID. This won't take as much effort or time as you might think. Donor ID. Oh, I don't get the donor name. I forgot about that. So let's skip the donor ID and just get the project ID part. So instead of doing donor ID here, let's do project ID. And rather than connect from DC donors, we're going to need from DC projects to get the project names. So then on this side, grab project ID. And then here in select columns, let's pull this off of join data. And rather than use project ID, we're going to change this to project title. Come on, my mouse gave out. There we go, project title. And then once again, donation amount, just like we had before. Okay, that should be pretty straightforward. So now let's just see if there's anywhere else here. Now when we are selecting this data, apply SQL transformation, it's not project ID we want first, it's going to be project title. That's going to be our primary key. Okay, and then group by project title down here. And then in our select columns, we'll need to change this from project ID to project title, but I think we need to run it first before that'll work. So I'm just going to go ahead and run everything, even though I know it's going to error out here on the select columns. I just got to get this apply SQL transformation to run first. Okay, that one's happy. Applying SQL. Unless I missed something, that one should work. Okay, that one's happy. Now this one should break. Okay, perfect. Just click on it, launch column selector, and rather than project ID here, we're going to include project title. That's all it takes. Check OK. However, we do need this to be in the right order. Well, actually, I guess we don't. I thought it did need to be in the proper order, but it looks like it's going to work fine. I know the user item rating has to be in that order, but perhaps it doesn't for user and item features. I was thinking the primary key always needed to be the first column. We'll see if this works. If not, then we'll know it does need to be the first column. Okay, I should have thought through this. Error on apply SQL because we still have donor ID in here. Let's just change, or sorry, project ID. Let's just change this to project title in both the select and the group by. Let's see here. I don't think we're going to have any other problems though. So go ahead and continue that. Okay, we got another error, and as I looked at it, I thought, you know, let's include in the video how I would debug this, because you'll run into things like this too, rather than just go back and edit the video and make it all smooth. So we have this error. It says duplicate feature item for definition for item Chrome on the range. Okay, items are the data coming in here to the training data set of item features, which is this stuff over here. So we have two titles with the same name. Now, does that mean somehow the same project is being duplicated, or there were just two projects with the same title? Well, to find that out, let's come here to our apply SQL transformation. And I want to include project ID again. Which means we have to put it both here and down in our group by. Okay, and then I'm going to run that and then select project ID. And then I'm going to export this thing as or convert. Oops, I'll have to wait till it's done. Convert the details to a CSV, and let's take a closer look at all of them. Because the preview here on select columns only shows me the first 100. And I may or may not see it in that list. So give this a second to finish. Okay, and now on the select columns, by name, we can include project ID. Okay, let's grab this, convert to CSV pill, run that off of there, run selected. As soon as this is done, there we go, we can just right click, results data set download. Let's open this up. Alright, let's expand this out, expand the title out, and I'm going to insert a table over the top of this so I can then sort by project title. There we go, and then I can just scroll down. It's a lot of projects though. Well, I don't even have to go all the way down to that one. Just look at some of these other ones. The same name, multiple projects listed. So that's potentially going to be trouble. I look for Chrome Chrome on the range. There it is, yep. Sure enough, we can see 2 of them. And I also learned something else. A lot of my project costs are completely blank. So it may be that we want to go back and select only those projects where cost is filled in, or those that were fully funded, days to funded, were filled in, or we need to predict or impute some of these values. But my guess is that would be tough to do with the features we have. I probably want to go back and select only those projects where cost is not null. But I'll leave everything for now. What this tells me everything I need to know, that we can have two project titles that are the same for different projects. Let's see if we can find some other examples of this once again. Oh, these are the first 2 right here in quotes. So do you ever have an example of duplicate titles that have different project costs? Or is it possible that, all right, for example, right here, all of these are missing the same data? I wonder if it's just the same same teacher, same project, just making multiple entries for some reason. So we're not going to go through and worry about cleaning this and doing it back up right. But what I am going to do, just so that everything works for this demo, is let's just do a remove duplicates and grab and keep the last title. Remove duplicate rows. And retain first. Now, I don't know if it makes a difference. We'll retain the last. And I'm going to say these duplicates will be based on project title. Yeah, that's all. And I'll go back through here and let's get rid of project ID. We don't need that anymore. And honestly, we don't need a bunch of this stuff anymore because we got rid of a lot of it right here. That's okay. Let's go ahead and finish this out now. And hopefully that'll take care of our problem. Nope, looks like I forgot to remove project ID out of the select columns as well. No problem. Check. I hope you don't mind my errors here too much. I've made these videos sometimes where I go through and I remove every possible error. Then I found that I actually get more student questions and problems because they'll make these same mistakes and they'll get stuck on the errors and not know what to do with them. So I've kind of learned just to leave my own errors in here and show you how I go through and solve them so you can learn some debugging on your own. It's just a nice excuse for me not wanting to edit my videos. Alright, looks like it's gone through, but we're going to make a couple more changes here. So first of all, we no longer need this evaluate recommender because we're going into production mode, and I should have mentioned that earlier. Now we're going to change this item recommendation from all items, or sorry, from rated items, and make sure that we're on from all items again. And the evaluate recommender would break anyway if we had that. So 2 things: double check, delete evaluate recommender, and make sure this is set to from all items. So this means recommend all projects to the user, whether they've donated to them or not. All right, I'm going to go ahead and run everything one more time just in case, and then we'll set up the web service. Since it's cached, it should go pretty quick here. There we go. Perfect. Setup predictive web service recommended. Awesome. Adds our new web service input and output. We no longer need all of these apply math operations. However, keep that apply SQL transformation because that's the one that groups together projects. Connect this down to where the apply math operation was before. Let's move these down here. Our web service input should now come somewhere after that select columns. So I'll put it could either go, I'm going to put all the way down here into this input for the score recommender. And then on select columns, let's make sure that we only have donor ID. So we pass in a donor ID, and actually I guess we don't need the supply SQL transformation yet either, because we're only going to be passing in one donor ID at a time. So let's go ahead and pass that one in. And then score recommender from all items correct. We'll need one more select columns, and the role of that one will be simply to remove that extra user ID, which we can't get to. I got to run the score matchbox recommender first. But get rid of that extra user ID that was unnecessary in the output. We may get an error here. Let's see. Okay, never mind. That seemed to work just fine. So now that we have the recommendations, come here to select columns. Let's eliminate donor ID and tell it we just want item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Check. Rerun the whole thing. Again, shouldn't take too long. Everything's cached. And the only new pill it needs to run is this last one. Okay, beautiful. Let's go ahead and deploy this web service. Awesome, let's download our Excel file. And you might remember from an earlier chapter, if you don't have Excel for PC, you've got all the information you need to do this through Excel Online instead, using the API key here and the URL found here in the details after clicking on request response right there, just as a reminder. Okay, download the Excel file. Yes, sample data. Here it is. Okay, enable editing. You should see our web service pop up over here. Great. All right, let's import data. Oops, no, not yet. Hold on, use sample data first. Okay, there's our donor IDs. Click this to select the input range. Okay. Output is going to be sheet 1, exclamation point B1. Include headers. Yep, got it. Auto predict, predict. This is a pretty slow recommender model here. Okay, there we go. So now we're getting not just the project IDs, but the project titles. And you can see these first 3 donors have the same recommendations, but then it gets different, at least for the 4th. But I've got it set on auto predict now, so I should be able to just grab a new donor ID and plug it in here and have it give me the next 5 items. So let's go ahead and try that. I'm going to grab one of the Excel files from before that we used to download some information. Oh, not that one. No, don't save. Let me just go back here. Experiment, experiment. And let's grab a donor ID from here. Let's scroll down a ways, find something different. Make that one right there. Back to Excel, plug it in. It's going to auto predict here, even though it's in a weird format. Oh, let's see. Features for this user required but not provided. For some reason didn't have those. Let's see here. Oh, that's because I put in a project ID. Really, really smart. All right, instead, let's grab a donor ID. How about that one right there? And plug that guy in. hopefully it's something different. By the way, yep, there we go. Well, the same as this one. The reason why so many are the same, remember, is because we use the partition and sample pill to turn down and reduce the data set. So there just aren't a whole lot of options in there because we just have minimal processing power. But anyway, you've got what you need now, a working deployed recommender model. And all you need to do to get this into production on a web app or mobile app is to go to the web service. Always do that right here. And give the developers the API key and go to this request response page. And I would just save this entire page for them as a PDF or something like that, or download the page. Everything they need to go ahead and deploy this is right in here along with the examples. Down here there's even separate code for different languages, so it makes it super easy. Alright, that's it. Hope you benefited or enjoyed this example of a Matchbox recommender. Good luck.